Hi, everyone. Welcome to our first nonprofit expert office hours. So we're so excited that you're here. I would love to kind of get to know who's here, who's been able to join today. This is our first run. We kept this intentionally small and are really kind of excited about this format, this idea that, hey, beyond just Boardable and what Boardable can do, we know that there's a lot of questions that people that are leading nonprofits and that are on nonprofit boards have, and we really want to be that trusted expert whenever we can. But we love to bring in outside experts as well. So we have Kristi Howard-Shultz here with us today, which I'll introduce her a little bit more here in a second. But in the meantime, if you want to go ahead and drop into chat and share your name, your organization and role, and then something you're passionate about. It could be inside or outside of work. And so it could be anything. I don't know if anybody else has the pickleball bug, but my colleague Levon is probably tired of me talking about it, but that's something that I'm currently passionate about outside of work. So feel free to drop any of those things over in the chat, just so that we can get to know each other. You will be able, this is like a new thing for us here at Boardable, you will be able to talk to us. So you should be able to come off of mute and actually talk and have a conversation. If we have trouble with that, we'll just use the chat over there. If you're not talking, we do encourage you to keep your microphone on mute. We know pets, dogs, animals, those types of things can be distracting for folks or children, right? Or whatever's in your background, right? So you can go ahead and put that on mute when you're not chatting. But otherwise, I will go ahead and have a couple of slides to get us started and then hand over some of the kind of top questions over to Kristi as well. So you'll receive this recording via email. So if you miss anything, if we say something, if we reference something, feel free to know that you don't have to take notes. You're going to get some exclusive bonus content from Boardable. So we have a few things that are usually gated or reserved for different purposes. We're going to give that to you as well. Kristi also has some really great bonus content that she'll overview here as well. So we'll make sure you get that. And feel free to share your questions, comments, or even emojis in the chat. We turned emojis on for this. We don't always do that for our webinars, but thought it would be fun for this more casual office hour type of setting. So super excited you all are here. As I mentioned, Kristi is our featured speaker and expert. She has hosted and co-hosted webinars with us in the past, and we just always love when she's here. She brings so many great insights to the Boardable community, and just really comes in with a ton of experience and just a different perspective than a lot of folks have. So Kristi spent 25 plus years as a nonprofit leader. She's the founder of KHS Consulting, which is a growing nonprofit consulting firm here in Indianapolis, or here in Indiana, but has tons of clients. And then she's a published speaker. So I've seen her speak at Raise. She's been a speaker at NIO, I believe, in the past, and several other nonprofit events. And then she truly is this trusted advisor to boards and CEOs. And so I feel like having that perspective of being an advisor to both the board as well as the CEO and, kind of that relationship just makes Kristi an amazing resource. So thanks for being here. I'm so glad you're here.
Thank you guys for having us, for having me.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So we'll get started with really just kind of looking at some of the common themes that you saw in the questions that got submitted, Kristi, and let you kind of go from there.
Yeah. Well, I'm really happy to be here. We were all just joking that it's back to school time here in Indiana, where we're coming to you from. And so all the germs are going around and all of those things. But it's also a very busy time for nonprofits because we're preparing for the fourth quarter. We're probably doing budgeting and thinking about those things. And so governance is related to all of those things. I loved seeing the questions come in. There were some big themes throughout all of the questions that were submitted. So I tried to summarize those here, but I'm going to let you all jump in and ask. But among the themes, you might not be surprised, those included, how do we recruit and onboard strong, representative, diverse boards? How do we understand our roles between board and staff and work cooperatively and keep everyone leaning on each other's strengths? And then board engagement is always a super hot topic. And then many folks had a very specific interest in board engagement and fundraising. And then in addition to that, some of the really practical nuts and bolts things about like, how do we develop compelling agendas for our board meetings and things like that. So I just wanted to identify those themes. We really do want this to be conversational and informal. So I'm going to invite you all, anyone that had any of these questions, to come off mute and just let's dive in. Or I'll take the first one, which is okay, while you all gather your thoughts and maybe come up with something more specific that might be burning for you and your organization. So for those folks that asked about recruitment and diversity, and we'll share, as Jenny said, these slides at the end, but we kind of like to think of it as almost doing an inventory of what your needs are in both skills and representation and resources, as well as who already is there. And so that not only gives us an opportunity to really hone in on what we need in the communities that we serve, but it also allows us to recognize and acknowledge the existing strengths, and maybe even gives us an opportunity to get to know current board members even better if we do this exercise together as staff and board. And so we've shared a handful of templates at the end, but that's how we like to think about it. What other communities are you not reaching, whether that's a donor community or a beneficiary community? What skills gaps are represented on the board or are going to be as your succession planning? Those are some of the big things that we like to think about when it comes to recruitment. I've also linked out to a really great resource that Boardable has when you think about how to find those people. And that can come from our donor pool. It can come from who knows who on the board. It can come from, honestly, even who is engaging the most with your content, whether that's your newsletter or your social media. Those folks are often indicating to us that they want us to reach out to them, right? I always joke that that's how I most commonly am recruited to a board, particularly for things with my kids, is they'll say, we noticed that you comment on everything, Kristi, or things like that. But I'm happy to serve when they notice that. And that is a big indicator that people are really engaged with your mission.
Kristi, when we talk about board recruitment and diversity, one of the things that came up I'd mentioned to Kristi, I was on a panel yesterday, and one of the things that kind of classically comes up is that idea of boards as fundraisers and like having some sort of like minimum donor amount or those types of things. Will you share your take on that? Because I don't want to say it's like controversial, right? But I recently was on a board where it was very much not that. And it was very much, we want the board to be kind of our mission guardians, if you will, and be like mission alignment and focused while doing things. They weren't really, the board wasn't about being like big funders. I'd love to, because I think that sometimes those can be competing, right? If you're like, hey, you have to have this, then that. So I'd love your take, or if anybody else has experienced that, or what you guys are doing in that realm, because I think fundraising, it's hard. I don't want to say it's hard. I always think of Boardable and board management as like one piece of the pie. Like, how are we spending the money? How are we executing? Where fundraising is this other piece. And right now I just feel so many, especially charitable organizations, that fundraising piece is just like the red light flashing piece, so I don't want to be ignorant to that either.
I think that's a great question. And honestly, this is something that we see in our practice as, I want to be thoughtful about the word that I choose, but almost like a ping pong issue in bylaws. So like with one set of leadership under their tenure, they may require a very specific give-get, which many of us are probably familiar with. Give or get, $5,000, $1,000, whatever is significant and meaningful contribution is to your representative organization. Then it will ping pong back to, well, if we do that, we eliminate whole sets of people that might have a very, very valuable, honestly, do have a very, very valuable perspective on our mission. So I do think that that's a hot topic right now. I think that if you want to be inclusive, you have to be mindful of what that looks like for you, and what a significant contribution means to me is something different than what it might mean to you. You might have connections, or the other way that I see boards address this is to have in the bylaws a special seat, like a designated seat, for example, if they want to have an alumnus, a beneficiary, something like that, where in the bylaws they call that out specifically so that that representation can still occur, but without the financial requirement that they are asking of other board members. So that's kind of like, if you think about it's either or, it's not either or, that's a third path, that's an option if you want to be inclusive in that way. Are other folks on the call facing that?
I've usually, where to start? We have very different board members, and some of them are wealthy and some of them are not. And one person had said, use your board as the consulting that would normally be too expensive for you to pay for. And so I've really seen the wealth of support that can be given, which is non-material at times. So I've suggested that everybody give at whatever level makes sense, because we want to have full board giving. That's important, obviously, with some foundational donors. But I don't care personally. And my fundraiser does not agree with me. I don't care personally how much that is, because I know if you have the means and you're bought in, you're going to give. But if you're giving $35, but what's more important to me is your advice, your engagement, your involvement, and some of that is priceless. So that's how I've kind of done it. My fundraiser pushes me to be asking for big bucks, but I think that comes with inspiration and kind of loyalty to the mission. It comes kind of naturally as people get really bought in and feel connected.
Yeah. Oh, I think that is such a great point. And such a wonderful lens to view what contribution, capital C contribution, means. I was recently recruited to a board where I'm new to the town that I just moved to. And I told them in the meeting, I don't know if I'm the right person because I don't yet have influence or affluence in this community. I'm connected in another community still. And actually, Mara, they literally said the exact thing that they were recruiting me for a different reason. And I said, okay, as long as we all understand what I can actually contribute, and that's actually what you want, then it's a good fit. But that's a really wonderful way to think of it. And I think I'm biased, but I think you're right. Kind of some of that practical knowledge can be priceless. So that's a great suggestion.
And I would add too, I think that comes back to maybe even the next topic, Kristi, of onboarding, right? Like if things are clear at the onset, that makes things so much easier, right? Like you aren't surprised and blindsided later, Mara, maybe if you're on your board, that it's like, oh, we try to have 100% board, participation in some sort of giving. Somebody's hopefully going to know that at the very beginning. So setting up those new board members for success with that clear onboarding. Are there, I guess, like, I know board terms really vary between organizations and those types, like whether it's coming up at the end of the year or just happened, I think usually June or January are pretty common times for some board turnover. Kristi, anything there that you want to talk about in regards to onboarding or folks? Are you struggling to get, A, recruiting, right? But then B, the folks onboarded?
Well, I definitely want anybody to chime in that, particularly if you had this question. This was my favorite set of questions, because to me, this is the most glaring omission of probably every group that we work with, because it's very difficult. We all know in the nonprofit sector that we're wearing multiple hats. It really does take dedicated time, energy, and a person to be able to do this. And so I think number one, just building that in to your organizational culture is like the first step, and a hard one. I'm not pretending that that's easy. When a funder calls this day and says, hey, we want to stop by instead, or what, it's very, very easy, right, to get derailed. But some other things that came to mind that I notice a lot among our client base, beyond having dedicated people and time to this, And Levon is sharing a really great checklist here from Boardable about all the practical nuts and bolts of it, is to make sure that you're allowing the people on your board, whatever this looks like in your organization, to have a tour, to serve a meal, to clean out a kennel, you know, whatever service, whatever benefit you're delivering to the community, being certain that they have real insight into what that is. And so maybe they're not going to come and serve meals every single Tuesday for the rest of their life, but having them come in and take a tour and do it one time is super important, because we are asking them to make decisions to govern the delivery of our mission. And if they are very disconnected, or they don't have a real frontline touchstone to that experience, to meet a beneficiary, to deliver some of the mission themselves, it sort of exists in a vacuum. So I think that those are really important things too. We ask board members to donate what they're comfortable giving. Yes. And then they can come to fundraising events and provide other support. So yeah, that's back to our original question, which is great. Yeah. What are other people seeing with onboarding, like struggles or successes?
My role is a little bit different than what it was in the past. I was a former executive director and sat on boards, but now coming back full circle to the Salvation Army, I'm helping to develop and grow our over 2,000 advisory organizations throughout the United States. So part of that is we have a certification process. It's internal. It's a silver or gold certification, just to make sure that what our advisory boards are doing is they're constantly evolving, and there's quality documents and things that they're using from a governance perspective. But as I'm reviewing like onboarding packets in particular, as they're trying to get gold or silver certification, sometimes there's continuity and sometimes there isn't. So what I do see is some of the things you're mentioning. A quality onboarding packet would mean that they're giving, they're meeting with the individuals, giving them a tour, making sure they're participating in any events they have taking place. And at the Salvation Army right now, we're thinking about Christmas. You know, it's one of our biggest times of the year. Are they participating in the Christmas campaign, either at a Toys for Tots area, or packing a Christmas food box, or ringing a bell, or things like that. So I look in those onboarding documents, do they have that piece? As far as the financial commitment, I think sometimes we can shoot ourselves in the foot if we have a predetermined amount, like you must give $1,000, because there may be some who can't give that. There may be some who are willing to give more. So I like to adopt, give as you feel comfortable. It seems to work. But other things we look for in the onboarding packet, regular attendance at meetings. Are they attending 2/3 of the meetings? And what occurs if someone starts missing meetings? How are they kind of reconnected to the mission as a good fit? Just everything, and the way that grace is extended to those who maybe have a change in life circumstances and can't participate at the level they once did. So sorry, I'm rambling, but I'm trying to piece together all these things I find in these onboarding packets.
No, I think that's so helpful, Daryl, and especially like in the structure that you have and that you're working with. I'm sure there is, my kids are Montessori kids, and so we say like freedom within limits. There's like a guideline, and then there's a little bit of deviation, right, from the guideline, because it's very probably specific to the community that the advisory board is in. And I also love what you said about how having a give-get, or whatever you call it in your organization, you have to be careful, because that can limit people. It can limit them to say, well, I only need to give $1,000, if they could then be more generous, or might otherwise be more generous. So that's a really good point too, definitely. Let's see. Cancer is everywhere, and a majority of our board members have a family or friend with cancer and understood the commitment to our mission, right? And so, Deanne, that is a great point. And particularly if you're thinking back to that original question, if you're working to diversify the board in a certain area, like let's say corporate support, those people may not have that natural connection. So all the more of greater importance to bring them in. And like you said, to the extent that it's possible to meet a beneficiary, someone that has a personal experience, definitely. And then another big theme among all the questions while Deanne is typing did include role clarity. So understanding the collaboration that happens between board and staff. And at the end, we have, I think of it like a Venn diagram, because there is, of course, we have our respective strengths and areas, and then there is a lot of intersection as well. And so I think we're just talking about onboarding, that can be a really important thing to talk about during onboarding. And if you have your own version of a Venn diagram, or we were with a client yesterday where they think of it as the balcony and the dance floor. The staff are on the dance floor and the board are in the balcony, watching. And so they may sometimes come down to the dance floor if they must, but then they return to the balcony, so whatever analogy is helpful to you in your organizational culture, your community that you're in, doing what you can to communicate. This is the area that you can have the utmost confidence that I am going to address as staff. And this is the part where we really need you as a board to come in and understand that this is your job and this is my job and these are our shared jobs and this is how we work together. So, but I really love that that analogy of the dance floor and the balcony, because that's a very nice way where I saw someone, their favorite hobby right now is gardening. I feel like gardening is the most common analogy in fundraising in particular, but in board management. And so you don't have to talk about getting into the weeds. You can talk about it in a different way. Dancing sounds more fun than pulling weeds to me anyway, so. Were there any other questions about role clarity that came up specifically for anyone right now?
I have one, Kristi. Oh, Mara, go ahead. Yeah, I'd love you. Yeah.
Thanks. I used to have a board that was disengaged. They just older and kind of quieter, and now we've had a totally changeover in board. We have a much more active, engaged board. In the old board, I completely managed up and led from behind. So in board meetings, I set the agenda. I kind of led the meeting because I wasn't getting clear indications that the head of the board would lead the meeting. And I'm still kind of doing that, even though the board is more active now. I've talked to other EDs. It seems to be that's the role we play. That we're certainly on nonprofit boards, we're the ones who are paid. The others are volunteers. They're giving so much of their time already. It makes sense that we run the agenda. But sometimes I'm just worried, am I taking too much of a I don't want to look like I'm taking away their power or their role. So I just wondered if that across the board, if other EDs or if you're in your experience still do feel like they're driving the ship, even if we're trying to do a delicate dance as we do that.
Yeah.
During meetings, actually, an agenda, keeping people on task.
Yeah. Well, do others have thoughts about that? I'm certainly happy to share kind of what we see. So I think this is also a very common question. One thing that I hear in your story, which I think we hear often, and again, I'm going to use a parenting analogy here, but this actually also happened with a group we were with earlier this week. It's kind of one of those things like if you do everything for them, then they never will learn how to do it for themselves because they don't have to, right? And yet sometimes that's the stark reality of what we're walking into. So I think that you sound like you're doing all the right things of like taking some steps back, like empowering people. I think another interim step in that is that sometimes you have to almost like prop the leader up as you're teaching them. Like, so you might be in the beginning, providing all the information, kind of showing them the way. And then all along the way, be communicating to them that it is your ultimate expectation that by X date or whatever, you'll be able to take this over. Or like, I'm going to go through this with you. And then by June, you'll have a better understanding. And you can authentically lead this part of it. That is very challenging to do. The other thing that I think that we notice with the groups that we work with, that's pretty common across the board, is that it is really challenging to give like the Goldilocks amount of information. We have to give enough information that people feel engaged, but not so much that they feel like they don't need to participate or come to the meeting. And so I see you smiling, like that is very difficult to figure out what that Goldilocks amount of information is. And that looks a little bit different. And you might have to experiment and iterate, again, depending on the talent and the personalities that are represented on your board at that specific time. It makes me think we should be paid $1 million a year because, oh my goodness, look at all these things that we're keeping track of. But that is another key element to kind of keeping everyone engaged in their respective roles that we see across the board anyway. So you're not alone, Mara. You're definitely not alone. And there's no one specific answer either. And then when we think about engagement, the other thing is, so some folks had some very specific questions about fundraising. We will share some resources at the end, but one of the things that I like to think about is how can we engage people in a low pressure way? So we have shared with you an example of a template that we use with some clients where, you know, you sort of have like your commitments menu. It's like choose 3 of these things, almost like a la carte, right? So they can come in, the board members, where they're comfortable and learn a bit more. So that might look like maybe they're not super comfortable asking for money, but maybe they would love to sign thank you cards every month. Maybe they they can't fill a table, but they can get their company to donate their suite for the next event, things like that. So a menu kind of gives you a little bit of flexibility, gives them some greater insight into the total span of what the commitments can look like, and then gives everybody a chance to get to know one another and get to know what they like to do. So you kind of see participation increase over time when we use tools like this, because it allows people to explore and find what they like and they enjoy, but without a ton of pressure and without being very, very limited to like, it's only that you make your gift or you must fill a table or things like that. So, and I think we've got about 15 minutes if folks have questions. Any other things about engagement before we move on to the next theme? Or things that you're doing to engage your board that are really, really working? Okay. And then the last theme that came up several times in those questions that were submitted were related to the actual nuts and bolts of running the meeting. And so, you know, we talked a little bit about that Goldilocks amount of information. I'm curious for the people that are on the call, how many people use a consent agenda? And I'm sure, Daryl, for you with every advisory group, it might be a little bit different if they do or they don't. It's different. Okay, that makes sense. So it definitely depends if you use a consent agenda or not, as far as the structure of the meeting. But I do think that the Angel Foundation does use consent agendas. Okay, so that's kind of the biggest thing in making the difference, in my opinion, as far as like, first off, right? We will link out to a resource at the end that kind of has some of these FAQs. I think, again, having sort of a standard template with a little bit of variation. I think the most important thing, though, for a meeting agenda is that folks know what to expect and they know that it matters that they're there. So like, they have to have something to do, or else we see attendance and participation decrease. So that might look different for every one of you. That could be, if you don't have a consent agenda, someone is there and it's very meaningful that they give their report. It could be that they are the person that's in charge of giving the mission moment, things like that. One thing that I will say, and Daryl, you talked really beautifully about this, but I think a meeting without a mission moment, whatever that looks like for you, is another sort of glaring omission that we see a lot of groups commonly make. Whether it's a story or you have someone from the staff come in, you have someone that's a beneficiary come in, whatever it is that you can do to share something in real time that's happening and the difference that you and your board have made in the community that you work in the lives that you touch, that's such an important thing to keep people engaged and definitely deserves a place in your meeting agendas. So we know there's a lot to do. There's a lot of spreadsheets to review and finances and decisions to make. And that storytelling is still an important part of it because all the decisions that we have to make are in that context, you know? So how many folks do a mission moment currently as part of your board meetings? Some folks are typing.
I think for me, as I review things, I think it varies across the board, but many will use a mission moment or a testimonial or something to
Looks like Daryl may have cut out for a couple of us. Just there, maybe a little bit of bandwidth Wi-Fi things there. But I mean, like, it sounds like we're across the board. Some folks are doing a pretty good job at the mission moment. I feel like it's one of those that, like, I really love, and we see our customers at Boardable use like a recurring agenda of some sort that has some sort of structure, that has the mission moments in there, or like, you know, has that kind of, Kristi, like the rinse and repeat, but like in different flavors, right? You don't want to do the exact same thing every time. But then secondarily, in that same sort of recurring agenda, the idea of tying back to the strategic plan in the agenda and like having that. Do you feel like it's, you know, I think that I've seen so many boards always organized in the fashion of, okay, they're going to be our fundraising liaison or the fundraising chair, the committee, you know, the classic board structure there. Do you feel like there's, you know, this new kind of matrix approach where it's also like, hey, let's take the strategic plan and the pillars there and also have a board member kind of following along with that pillar, regardless of sort of functional area, you know, and I feel like that matrix is really where kind of the beauty can be. Like, we have somebody over these core things on the strat plan, but then we also have folks that are like, SMEs or subject matter experts on legal and finance, and, you know, maybe running some of those. I'm curious if you're seeing that happen more.
Oh, I also love that question. I love seeing Daryl shake his head. Yes, 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 because I think just like the mission is the lens through which we're viewing everything, we also have to kind of keep the strategic plan as a lens over that also, and is another thing that's really easy to lose sight of. It is pretty common that in the strategic plan, the pillars will naturally, some of them, line up with an existing position like finance or development or things like that. It's also common that there's a handful of things that are task force or committee oriented that need that, like you're saying, Jenny, sort of constant place on the agenda until the end of the 3 years or whatever, however long you're doing your strategic plan for. So we are seeing that more often, and I would honestly like to see it even more. You know, for a lot of the groups that we work with, you know, advocacy or public policy is becoming kind of a bigger issue right now in the climate that we're in, as far as how it affects not just our programming, but our funding and all of those things. And so we are seeing a lot of dedicated seats and time and task forces and places on the agenda for that topic in particular. I absolutely think that's important. And that is something that's shifting a little bit. So really great point there, Jenny, especially if we don't, if we just do the strategic planning part and we don't actually implement the plan and we don't keep it on the agenda, we're definitely not going to implement it. So really good point. Yeah, I love having people come and share their experience if you can have that, and it's appropriate, right? We always want to protect vulnerable identities and, you know, get consent and all of those things. But to the extent that you have people that want to personally share their story, that is, there's no better way. That gives me goosebumps just reading that. There's no better way to do that. So a video is great, reading a testimonial is great, but meeting someone in real life is like, I'm biased, I'm a people person, but that is the greatest thing. So yeah. Any other questions today or thoughts that have come up kind of as we, providing an update on the strategic plan is important, even if it's not, every single meeting, but it's several meetings throughout the year, definitely. Any other final thoughts or questions today?
I would encourage all of you, to take advantage of this time, or, and advantage is not the right verb either, but Kristi is just such an expert when it comes to being able to provide, how to work with boards, especially when times get tough, when there's a lot of transitions, like that type of thing. Having that outside perspective, it is great, and I'm, sure she would be happy, to talk more about like what engaging with her and her organization looks like. But truly can personally vouch that she's one of the best out there, and really has that insight. I think, a lot of us maybe have seen 3 or 4 boards, but, somebody that's seen 30, 40, a few hundred boards, is just a different beast. It sounds like, Daryl, maybe you are starting to get some of that similar experience of being able to see across how different the different challenges, but that there's also some similarities in the challenges. Kristi, you had mentioned this, but this is really a great link up, if you will, of some of the board resources between KHS Consulting, as well as a few on Boardable and BoardSource that I know that you tap into quite a bit, Kristi. Any other thoughts on this slide?
The only other thing that I wanted to say is I wanted to say thank you, Jenny, to you and Levon, and to Boardable, that I think Boardable is doing such a great job of creating authentic community. When I was on the other side, when I wasn't a consultant, I was an executive director, it would always frustrate me that we didn't have these kind of forums. Really, it was really hard. You might be able to go to an AFP meeting or something, but like, that's not the same as being able to do something like this, or even participate in the Slack channel and just kind of have a judgment-free zone of, hey, this is what I'm really wrestling with, and what have you seen work? And so I just want to commend you on that, and thank you for inviting me to be a part of that. And encourage all of you, if you're not already in there, to get on the Slack channel and use these resources, because I've been really enjoying being a part of the community. And yes, consulting and all those things, it doesn't need to be expensive or aloof. It needs to be accessible. So thank you guys for leading this charge.
I love it. Thank you so much. The last thing, Kristi mentioned our nonprofit network Slack community. Another thing that we're investing in, kind of bringing to life, just like these nonprofit office hours, really experimenting a little bit, just to be candid, when it comes to how are we building community, and how are we making sure that our customers and our prospects have a place to connect, have a place to hear from experts, true experts that are living and breathing it every day, that we kind of bring to you in different ways. So encourage you to join there. Thanks everybody for joining. I appreciate it. It's always fun to kind of do something once. I'm sure we'll evolve this, but I felt like some really good conversation. Hopefully some good resources headed your way. I always learn something hearing from Boardable customers as well as other folks, and I'm always leaving like, oh my gosh, like we have the best customers, we doing the best work out there, and it's really, I would say, motivating and energizing for all of us here as well. So thank you so much. Anything else that I should add, Kristi, or are we, I think we're just right on time.
I don't think so. It's a joy to meet each of you, and thank you for taking the time to be here. I know you're busy enough, and submit your questions. And I was going to end with what Deanne already said, but I'm glad to hear you say it. I think that's the biggest thing, is that we definitely are not alone. I mean, there were 25 different questions, 20 different questions, but 3 or 4 themes. So so nice to meet you all. I hope you have a good afternoon. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.